seeing them all thanking each other. I'd like to thank Mark and Annie as well. Like, this is just a fantastic venue, and I'll definitely be. Because Bhutan is on my list of places to go.
It's a good bucket list.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me, and thank you for coming. There are more people here than I expected, to be honest. It's interesting because the structure of my presentation is basically chronological in terms of where I started and how I've gotten to this point. And the Churchill Fellowship, for some reason, they identified a passion in what I was doing, and that's basically, if anybody's interested in doing such a thing, that's basically that's the advice that I would give, because a number of people have contacted me since and said, oh, how do you get a Churchill Fellowship? And I think it's like, you have a passion for something, and you can clearly outline what the benefit is to the Australian community. So that's how I ended up here. Where I started was in Rockhampton. I grew up in Rockhampton, central Queensland, and some of my earliest memories were missing school because of the floods and having to tiptoe over crocodiles and snakes as they were kind of escaped from the local crocodile farm and ended up in your backyard. So these are some images of Rockhampton just post, well, obviously during the flood in 2011. I got stuck up there because typically I would go back every year in December to see my mum for Christmas. And at the time, my family got stuck in Rocky Way, and as soon as the Bruce Highway opened, we snuck through. Then we got stuck in Bundaberg. Actually, I think Bundaberg went first, and then Rockhampton, and so we had to wait for Bundaberg to open before we could leave Rockhampton. And then on the way we got stuck in Gympie, and then we ended up in Brisbane, and that's when Brisbane flooded. So yeah, it was a sort of a 2-week period there where we were dodging the floods that had occurred. But the interesting thing about Rockhampton is that I don't remember it ever being a cataclysmic event in my childhood, which happened regularly. I don't remember it being a fear-related thing at all. If anything, it was actually kind of a fun sort of thing to do. And this is what I remember. We would get tire tubes and we'd go down the nearest flood part and basically kind of through. Nowadays it's all about don't let your children do that. But, so that was my memory of Rockhampton, and then moving to Brisbane it became a bit of a different story. And we all know the 2011 floods, for those of you this is, so you go from sort of that to this, and from my point of view as an architect, and that's what I do, I've retired from academic work, which I did until last year. I was just saying to Peter Skinner, who started all of this with me in a way. We were there working all this out at the beginning back in, I think, the first week after the floods in 2011. So it's good that Peter's here tonight, and we all participate. Well, I'm sure for those who were here, we would have participated in this, and it just sort of struck me because I did participate in this. Just the difference in what I'd grown up with in terms of flood events, and then what Brisbane was experiencing. So at the time, actually I think I met at your house, didn't I, Pete? I think we went over, we talked about when you were the president of the Institute. Yeah. And we talked about doing this. At the time I was working with the architects, and I just felt that I needed to do something, and so we decided to focus on uninsured people who were affected by the floods. And so we put it out there to the Institute through Peter, and we got about 300 interested professional people that came to an event at QUT at a very early stage in the flood relief effort. and out of that about 60 registered architects and about 100 students came together to basically door knock and undertake a significant kind of relief effort for people who don't normally deal with architects. So we primarily worked across 34 suburbs, and this is what we did. We went into people's homes and helped them understand the process of rebuilding, if it needed a development approval or just a straight building approval. We had moisture meters that we could read moisture levels in homes. We ended up helping about 1,200 families across the 34 suburbs, and the idea was that we got the students involved, and I think that was a really great idea because I think, Peter, you also helped in the 1974 floods when you were a student, is that right?
I had a story coming from Mount Isa to Brisbane that took 2 weeks because of that cyclone flood.
Yeah.
So my first week as an architecture student was going out to Chelmer to inspect houses that had been flooded in 74 and look at the various performance of building materials. So that felt very important.
Yeah, and because of that experience, we teamed students up. So we basically had one architect and 2 students, and then if we needed structural advice from an engineer, we had Arab who provided advice as well. And so the architects would evaluate the homes, and then if we felt our response was limited, we would then get structural guys back in. But basically, that's just a map of where we actually worked. You can see there the Goodna. We did a lot of inspections in Goodna, and from my point of view, mind you, we were working with uninsured people. In the end, it was insurance pending as well, because there were a lot of people ringing up and we need help, but we're insured, and we only hear you work with uninsured, and then we're like, well, okay, we'll come out. But we didn't want to get involved in between insurance companies and individual homeowners. So if people were insured, we sent them to the Archi Centre through the Institute. What I understand from that is that you've got the confluence, obviously, of the Bremer River and the Brisbane River, and Goodna's pretty much smack bang in the path of that. Moggle's highly insured. A lot of wealthier people live in Moggle, north of the river there. So we didn't do as many assessments, which is why Goodna was the focus, really. The other focus was Rockley, and also in East Ipswich as well. The Ipswich Mayor was amazing. He really helped us. I could call him any time. He promoted the work we were doing. So that really helped out, and that's one of the reasons we had so many more inspections in Ipswich, because the political will was there. Whereas Brisbane, I think, it's just a really big kind of organisation, and it's a lot harder to climb the ladders of authority in that sense. This is the kind of thing. This was the first one, actually, Peter. This is the one we went to with. So basically, what we did was we got building inspectors from Archi Centre together with engineers and architects, and we designed an actual inspection form. We took a film. We did an inspection of this particular house. It's the first one we ever did. At the time, a friend of mine took a film of that as they inspected an actual house. We did a brick veneer house in Fig Tree Pocket or something, and then this one's in Graceville, which is basically just a timber frame home. We then converted that film into a form. So this is sort of what we saw, basically. We converted that into sort of a 9-page form, which was then filled out by the architects manually. The students would then come back to the office, plug it in, take photos of what was said, and then that information was then given back to the homeowner. And the whole point of that was to stop dodgy builders coming in and telling them that they actually needed to replace their entire roof, for instance, whereas they didn't need to do that, etc., etc. It was to assist people's understanding. And also, what we found was, like, a lot of people just like to talk about what had happened. Like, it wasn't it was like having a cup of tea and going through things. So there was a whole community engagement kind of element to it as well. Because a lot of people had been through the 74 floods and were surprised that they hadn't flooded in 74, but had flooded this time, even though the water level was lower. And this is the ARIP assessment as well, just in terms of just an example of what was done. Then from there, because of the commission inquiry was occurring, I thought it would be a good idea to actually try and make a report and then submit that to the commission inquiry. So we then went about mapping what we found, not only mapping but also putting tables together that could be easily understood. And there's a report on my website that you can easily download if you want to see some more. But basically went through each element of the building. Out of that, we then produced these maps. So, for example, this is structural superficial damage. I'll go through it kind of quickly. The report's there, and you can see these particular maps. So, mapping superficial damage was non-structural damage due to flood, basically. And then we looked at this is the age of the houses that we were working on, and you can sort of see here that that's where the track development occurred between Brisbane and Ipswich over sort of in the 90s. A lot of developers building brick veneer homes, slab on ground, in floodplains, assuming that big pipes would actually work, but that doesn't actually happen. Structural damage, you can see Moggle had a lot of structural damage, and that's obvious because there was stories out there where people hadn't flooded in 74 and thought, oh, well, we'll be fine, locked their homes up, went away and came back 3 days later and their house is gone. So, so there were all sorts of things going. Then we correlated that. There's a whole explanation of how all this kind of goes in the reports, and correlated damage versus age, and then structural damage versus age. Inundation levels. Now this is interesting because obviously due to topography, and that's why you can see Goodna was affected the most, between 4 and 5 days, whereas up towards Wivenhoe, we were getting 8 to 12 hours of flooding, high velocity, a lot of structural damage up towards Somerset and those sort of areas. But as it sort of flooded through, you can see Rockley, there's another one, and then I think that would be Fairfield as well. So Fairfield, Rockley, Goodna. It seems that obviously due to topography the water sits around and doesn't move, and that can cause all sorts of issues in terms of longer term moisture in timbers and things like that. So, and then we looked at inundation versus damage. Then we looked at income levels. So the deeper the green, the higher the income. And then we correlated that with damage as well. Out of that, I was very careful about not taking any professional work out of this at all, because at the time I had my own practice and I was afraid that it would be seen the only reason I was doing this kind of work was to generate income for myself. The actual reason was that 2 years prior, my sister had lost her home in Kinglake in the fires down in Victoria, and the organisation I worked for had helped rebuild a community hall down there, which was very successful in that particular community, which I helped to kind of get the impetus going for that project. But when I went to visit, I noticed the difference between those who were insured and those who weren't insured. There were signs up all over the place saying, don't blame us, we actively fought to defend our home, we don't know why our house was burned, whereas the next door neighbour's wasn't. So fires are, it's a picky, choosy kind of thing, whereas flood, it's a much more deliberate kind of experience. Anyway, out of the work we did with the AA, I started realising that there were better ways to actually design for flood, and it's not just about elevation, and that's something that has come back in terms of our practice work. So things like this, so these houses were flooded up to 3 metres or 2 to 3 metres above their ridge lines because they're actually built in a floodplain. I mean, you can even see, this is in Goodna, I mean, that's the actual, that's the point at which the sort of flood, the plain itself, actually the bowl ends. And so then this stuff sort of started popping up, and it really upset me because as an architect, we're concerned with things like this. And to me, that is not a healthy community environment. Okay, I'm going to just say it out. Like, that is bad. Okay, and that is the temporary local planning instrument that was put in place after these events. And I understand the political pressure, I understand the reasons for all of that, but that's what I was actually asked to do and I was expected to do as an architect. This is in Fairfield, just near the Fairfield Coles there. And I mean, that house there used to sit down here, and I understand that that costs quite a fair bit of money to do that, which is why these people haven't done it, and these people haven't done it, because it does cost money. And this is the first project I was actually requested to do. It was an interesting one because this is in Fairfield. My clients came to me and said, look, we've spoken to 5 other architects and they all say we have to build up above the flood line and there's nothing we can do about it. But we actually can't afford to do that. We simply cannot afford to do that. We need $300,000. The insurance companies have given us $80,000 because at the time a lot of the insurance assessors were from overseas with very little experience of the Australian building context. So they were conveniently evaluating a lot of the repair bills to be very, very low. And in the end, this ended up costing $220,000, including GST, and we couldn't afford to get the painting done at the time. So the painting actually that you see in the right-hand photo came later. So the question to me as the architect was, can you design something where we can actually just, if we've got enough time, because in Brisbane we typically do get enough time before a flood event. Like we might have 3 or 4 days. So the question was, can you help us design something that we can just flood and just wash out, and then go about our business after the event. And because I'd done a lot of the EAA work, I realised there were a number of things within a house that, like for example, kitchen bench tops. Typically they're sitting on like a carcass of particle board or melamine, whatever it is, and that typically swells, the bench top cracks, it gets thrown out. The bench top is actually the most expensive component typically, etc., etc. So there were a number of ideas that came through this. Even the plan.
You don't want questions as you go. No. So you did raise that at all?
We've raised it and moved it.
Oh, you did raise it?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was going to say that 2011
we had to.
Flood level appears to be below their first floor.
That's right. So, we actually had to raise it even, I think we raised it about 1 metre and shifted it back, because obviously when you raise, this is the other issue with the situation, when you raise, you've also got to record to the new setback rules that have come into place since that house was actually originally built. So thankfully, we were in a position where we could actually shift the house back on the block to then get our 2 metres or 2.5 metres each side, etc., etc. Not so convenient on other projects that I'll show as well. Why was the decision made to raise that? Because the habitable floor level at Q1 has to be 500 mil above the Q100 level.
So it was a code, BCC code.
Yeah. So I think the habitable floor level is 500 mil above the 2011 flood level. I think it is, and then something like that. So that line there was deliberate in that the whole house became about doors and not about windows. The plan was basically designed, so you can see that we've raised it. But the plan was designed so that it basically just had doors that opened up on all sides, so you could just flush the whole thing out. And then resilient materials in terms of, in this particular situation, we had very large eaves, so we've gone with a single skin block, decorative block, half height, so it's not ugly. And then we've kind of, and this is what it looks like on the inside. So basically, a ground concrete slab, nothing special. It costs about $60 a square metre to do that with a polyurethane finish, satin finish on it. All the sills are set down so you can just flush things out. We didn't have enough money to finish upstairs, so this is kind of looking back into the kitchen. Now, the issue with a lot of these things is that under the building code, the definition of a habitable room is the issue, because these guys were faced with the question of how do you create habitable spaces under the Q100 line, which you're not actually able to do. But they had no other choice, because their habitable spaces were originally on the ground floor anyway. So what do they then do? Do they just jack the house up and then build an extension on the back of it and just have pilates, or do they